In the cradle of civilization, in the land we now call Iraq, two rivers gave birth to the first cities. The Tigris and Euphrates nourished the soil, and with their waters, humankind learned to farm, to settle, to build. Out of mud bricks rose walls, out of reeds rose temples, and in the crowded streets of Uruk, the first empire of humanity flourished. This is where the oldest epic of the world was born. The story of Gilgamesh is not just a tale of kings and gods. It is the story of humanity discovering itself, our hunger for meaning, our fear of death, our longing for love and friendship, our dream of immortality. 4,000 years ago, it was written into clay, pressed with the wedge-shaped script of cuneiform. For centuries it lay forgotten, until its rediscovery in the 19th century shocked the modern world, revealing not only the oldest surviving masterpiece of literature, but also a mirror held up to our deepest questions. The city of Uruk, where Gilgamesh reigned, was one of the first true urban centers in human history. Around 3000 BCE, its walls stretched nearly 10 kilometers, enclosing a population larger than most medieval cities. It boasted temples to the goddess Inanna, towering ziggurats of baked brick, and avenues teeming with merchants, priests, farmers, and soldiers. To the Sumerians, Uruk was the jewel of Mesopotamia, a city of awe and terror, where divine order and human ambition met in fragile balance. The man at its center, Gilgamesh, was described as 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal. His mother was the goddess Ninsun, wise and revered, while his father was said to be Lugalbanda, a mortal king later deified. The epic paints him as both hero and tyrant, mighty in battle, unmatched in strength, but cruel to his people. He took sons from their families to fight. He took brides on their wedding nights, and his arrogance knew no bounds. The people of Uruk groaned under his rule and cried out to the gods for relief. The gods listened. From clay and wilderness, they shaped a rival. Enkidu was his name, a wild man, shaggy-haired, roaming with gazelles, drinking at watering holes with beasts. He was untouched by civilization, innocent of bread and beer, clothed only in nature's hide. A trapper first discovered him, alarmed that this creature was setting animals free from his snares. The trapper sought counsel and was told to bring a woman to tame him. So Shamhat, a temple prostitute, journeyed to the watering hole. She stripped, lay with him, and for 6 days and 7 nights they coupled. When it ended, the animals turned away from him, for he was changed. He could no longer run with them. He was human now. Shamhat clothed him, taught him to eat bread and drink beer, taught him music, taught him the ways of cities. With her, he left the wilderness behind, transformed into a man of culture. But when he learned of Gilgamesh's tyranny, he was filled with anger. He vowed to confront the king of Uruk, to put an end to his cruelty. Their meeting was fierce. Enkidu blocked Gilgamesh as he approached a bride, and the two wrestled with such force that the walls of the city shook. They grappled like lions, locked in combat. But when Gilgamesh prevailed, he did not destroy Enkidu. Instead, he was awed. They looked into each other's eyes and saw not rivals, but equals. From that moment, a bond was born stronger than brotherhood. Enkidu and Gilgamesh became companions, and together they sought adventure. Gilgamesh, restless and hungry for glory, proposed a quest to journey to the cedar forest, guarded by the monstrous Humbaba, servant of the god Enlil. The forest was sacred, its trees immense and ancient, its guardian terrible and strong. Yet Gilgamesh was not deterred. He called upon the elders of Uruk, who warned him of the danger, and upon his mother Ninsin, who prayed to Shamash, the sun god, for protection. Armed with weapons forged by craftsmen, Gilgamesh and Enkidu set out. Their journey was long and filled with omens. Each night, Gilgamesh was troubled by dreams, of mountains falling upon him, of wild bulls trampling the earth. Each time, Enkidu interpreted them as signs of victory. When they reached the cedar forest, the air grew heavy, and Humbaba appeared. His roar was like a flood, his breath like fire, his voice like thunder. Gilgamesh was afraid, but Enkidu urged him on. Together, with Shamash sending mighty winds, they attacked. The winds trapped Humbaba, binding his limbs, and though he pleaded for mercy, they struck him down. With his death, they felled the sacred cedars and cut them into logs, carrying their spoils back to Uruk. But their triumph did not go unnoticed. In the heavens, Ishtar, goddess of love and war, cast her eyes upon Gilgamesh. She desired him, offered him riches, kingship, and divine favor. But Gilgamesh scorned her. He recited the fates of her past lovers, each one ruined or destroyed by her wrath. Enraged, Ishtar ascended to her father Anu, demanding vengeance. She begged for the bull of heaven, a beast so massive that its hooves split the earth, and its snort brought famine. Anu reluctantly gave it, and the bull descended upon Uruk. Hundreds fell in its wake. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu fought side by side, and together they slew it. In victory, Enkidu hurled the bull's thigh at Ishtar, mocking her. The gods convened. Enough, they declared. The men had killed Humbaba, slain the bull of heaven, and defied the divine. One of the two must die. The choice fell upon Enkidu. Enkidu sickened. He dreamed of the underworld, of darkness where kings sit in dust, where crowns lie discarded, where the dead eat clay. He cursed Shamat for bringing him into the world of men, but then he blessed her, for through her he had known friendship. For 12 days he suffered, until at last he died. Gilgamesh's grief was boundless. He wept, tore his hair, wandered the wild. He looked upon Enkidu's still face and saw his own fate. He realized that no strength, no kingship, no wall could keep death at bay. Struck with terror, he abandoned his throne and roamed the wilderness, clad in skins, searching for a way to escape mortality. His path was no longer that of a king, but of a man haunted by the knowledge of his own end. He sought Utnapishtim, the one man who had survived the flood and been granted eternal life. To reach him, Gilgamesh crossed deserts and mountains, until he came to the twin peaks of Mashu, guarded by scorpion men whose gaze brought death. Yet they recognized his divine blood and let him pass through the tunnel of darkness. For 12 leagues he walked in pitch black, until light broke, and he emerged into a garden by the sea, where trees bore jewels as fruit. There he met Siduri, the alewife of the gods, who warned him that death was man's fate, and that he should instead eat, drink, love, and be merry. But Gilgamesh pressed on, refusing comfort. She directed him to Urshanabi, the boatman of Utnapishtim, who could carry him across the waters of death. Gilgamesh shattered the sacred stones of Urshanabi in his desperation, but still the ferryman relented. Together they crossed the deadly waters, and at last Gilgamesh reached Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim, the far distant one, regarded Gilgamesh with sorrow. This weary traveler, once the mighty king of Uruk, stood broken before him, desperate for answers. Gilgamesh begged for the secret of immortality, pleading to know how Utnapishtim and his wife had achieved eternal life. Utnapishtim did not answer at once. Instead, he told him the story of the flood, a story older than Gilgamesh himself, older even than the walls of Uruk, a tale passed down through Sumerian poets and preserved by Babylonian scribes. It was a story that echoed across cultures, one that later would be told in Genesis as the tale of Noah. But here, carved into clay centuries earlier, was the first great flood narrative of humankind. Long ago, the gods decided that mankind must perish. Humanity had multiplied, become noisy, disturbing the gods with their constant clamor. Enlil, the lord of storms, decreed destruction. But Ea, the god of wisdom, disagreed. Bound by oath not to betray the divine council, He chose instead to whisper the secret in a way that would not break his vow. He spoke not to Utnapishtim directly, but to the walls of his reed hut, saying, "Man of Shuruppak, tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon possessions, seek life. Spurn wealth, save your soul. Take into the boat seed of every living thing." Utnapishtim obeyed. He built a vessel vast as a city, its dimensions precise, length and width equal, 7 decks, 9 compartments, caulked with bitumen, sealed tight against the flood. His family boarded, as did craftsmen, animals, and seeds of life. When the appointed time came, the sky grew dark. The storm god roared. The clouds gathered, and rain fell in torrents. The earth split, releasing waters from the deep. The very heavens warred with the earth. For 6 days and 7 nights the tempest raged. The gods themselves trembled at the violence. They cowered in fear, ashamed at the destruction they had unleashed. Ishtar cried out like a woman in labor, lamenting that she had ordered this doom. On the 7th day silence fell. Utnapishtim opened a window. All mankind had turned to clay. The boat had come to rest upon Mount Nisir. He waited 7 days, then released a dove. It circled and returned, finding no perch. He released the swallow. It too returned. Then he released a raven. The bird flew off, found food, croaked, and did not return. Seeing this, Utnapishtim released all within the ark and offered a sacrifice upon the mountain. The gods gathered around the sweet savor like flies. Enlil was enraged, discovering a mortal had survived. But Ea rebuked him, saying, "Lay not all the guilt upon the innocent. Punish the sinner, but not all mankind." A flood was too much. Enlil relented, and Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality, taken to dwell at the mouth of the rivers beyond the world of men. When Gilgamesh heard this tale, his heart fell. Immortality was a one-time gift, never to be repeated. Yet he persisted. He begged for some way, any way, to escape death. Utnapishtim proposed a test. If Gilgamesh could conquer sleep, then perhaps he could conquer death. Gilgamesh sat down, determined to remain awake. But exhaustion overcame him, and he fell into slumber almost instantly. Utnapishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread for each day he slept, laying them beside him. For 6 days he lay there, until the loaves grew stale and moldy. On the 7th day, Utnapishtim touched him, and he woke, protesting that he had only closed his eyes for a moment. But the loaves betrayed him. Even in this small trial, he had failed. He could not master the gentlest cousin of death. Crushed, Gilgamesh prepared to return home, his quest in ruins. But Utnapishtim's wife took pity on him. She persuaded her husband to reveal a secret. At the bottom of the sea, there grew a plant with the power to restore youth. Sharp as a thorn, painful to grasp, but if eaten, it could renew a man's vigor. Gilgamesh tied stones to his feet, sank beneath the waves, and plucked it. Rising to the surface, he rejoiced. Though he could not live forever, he would bring the plant back to Uruk and share it with the elders, giving them new life. On his journey home, weary from travel, he stopped to bathe in a cool pool. As he rested, a serpent smelled the plant's sweetness. It slithered near, seized it, and ate. At once it shed its skin, rejuvenated, leaving Gilgamesh empty-handed. When he saw this, he sat and wept. His last hope stolen, his long quest ending in defeat. He returned to Uruk, burdened with sorrow, but changed by wisdom. He had traveled the world, spoken with the immortal, survived the waters of death, and learned the truth, that man cannot escape mortality. Yet he also saw what endures. Standing upon the great walls of Uruk, he looked at their height, their strength, the work of countless hands. Here lay his true immortality, not in unending breath, but in the legacy of what he built. His name, his city, his story would outlast him. And so the tale ends where it began, with the walls of Uruk, the mighty city, and the king who built them. Gilgamesh could not defeat death, but through this story, his voice still lives, echoing across 4 millennia. Though the story itself ends with the walls of Uruk, the Epic of Gilgamesh is far more than an ancient adventure. It is a mirror of the world that created it, a world where gods were many, where kingship was sacred, and where clay tablets carried the voices of poets and priests. To understand the epic in full, we must see the soil from which it grew. The Sumerians, who first told the tales of Gilgamesh, were among the earliest people to invent writing. Around 3100 BCE, in southern Mesopotamia, they pressed reeds into wet clay, creating wedge-shaped marks we call cuneiform. At first, these signs recorded trade, grain, cattle, silver. But over centuries, writing became more than bookkeeping. It became a medium for myth, hymn, prayer, and poetry. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the crown jewel of this tradition. Uruk itself was a city of astonishing scale. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of walls, temples, and tablets that confirm its centrality. The temple of Inanna, goddess of love and war, stood at its heart, a place where priests and priestesses mediated between gods and men. Daily life was tightly bound to the rhythms of ritual. Offerings at dawn, libations at dusk, festivals honoring the moon god Nana or the storm god Adad. Kingship was seen as divine order made flesh. Gilgamesh's tyranny, therefore, was not simply political. It was a violation of the sacred trust between king, people, and gods. The epic reflects this tension. When the gods create Enkidu, they do not merely fashion a rival, they send balance. Gilgamesh, unchecked, becomes a danger to his city. Enkidu tempers him, reshapes him. Their friendship embodies the balance between wilderness and civilization, instinct and law. Even their battles are allegories. Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest, is more than a monster. He is the embodiment of nature's limits, a boundary the gods place to restrain mankind. By killing him, Gilgamesh and Enkidu assert human ambition over the natural world, cutting down trees that were meant to stand eternal. In this act, we glimpse humanity's restless urge to conquer, to exploit, to dominate. Ishtar's rejection by Gilgamesh is equally symbolic. She is desire itself, radiant, fertile, destructive. When Gilgamesh insults her, he insults the forces of sexuality and renewal. The bull of heaven is unleashed not merely as punishment, but as cosmic consequence. In slaying it, the two men become guilty of cosmic hubris, stepping beyond the role mortals should play. The gods' council afterward reveals a truth embedded in Mesopotamian thought. To overreach is to invite ruin. Enkidu's death, therefore, is not random. It is justice, harsh, divine, and inevitable. The wild man, who once lived outside the city, is brought into civilization only to be taken by it. His dreams of the underworld reveal the Mesopotamian vision of death, a place where all souls, noble or wicked, eat dust and sit in darkness. Unlike later traditions, there is no paradise, no heavenly reward. Death is universal and bleak. It is this vision that terrifies Gilgamesh and propels him into the wilderness. His journey is humanity's own. He seeks Utnapishtim, but in truth, he seeks an answer to the human condition. When he hears the flood story, he confronts the scale of divine power. The gods can destroy worlds, but even they regret their choices. Mortality is not just punishment. It is boundary. Gilgamesh's failure to conquer sleep is an elegant metaphor. Death is the sleep from which no man wakes, and even the mightiest king cannot resist drowsiness. The serpent that steals the plant of youth is another symbol. In many cultures, serpents are linked to renewal, shedding their skins, living on while men die. In taking the plant, the snake claims what was never meant for human hands. Immortality belongs to nature, not mankind. And yet, the epic does not end in despair. Gilgamesh's final vision is not of death, but of walls. Civilization itself becomes his immortality. The baked brick, the city that outlasts its builders, the story that endures in clay, these are humanity's weapons against oblivion. We may not live forever, but what we make can echo through time. Centuries after it was first composed, scribes in Babylon and Assyria recopied the epic, refining it into the standard version. Around 1200 BCE, a scholar named Eswe Anleki Onini is believed to have woven the scattered Sumerian talis into the 12-tablet masterpiece we know today. He gave it shape, arc, and coherence. Without him, Gilgamesh might have remained a patchwork of myths. Instead, it became a unified meditation on kingship, friendship, and mortality. But even this standard version did not survive intact. When Assyria fell and Nineveh was sacked in 612 BCE, the great library of Ashurbanipal collapsed into ruins. Thousands of clay tablets were buried, shattered, and scattered. For 2,000 years, Gilgamesh was silent. Only in the mid-19th century, when explorers dug through the ruins of Nineveh, did his voice return. The story of rediscovery is as dramatic as the epic itself. In 1872, George Smith, a self-taught scholar working at the British Museum, was studying tablets from Nineveh when he encountered a fragment. As he pieced together its lines, he realized what he was reading, a flood narrative older than Genesis. He leapt to his feet, stripping off his clothes in excitement before the astonished trustees of the museum. Newspapers carried the story. The biblical flood was not unique. Here was an older account, inscribed centuries before the Bible. The revelation electrified the Victorian world. Since then, archaeologists and philologists have worked tirelessly to piece together the epic. The tablets are scattered in museums, many incomplete, their lines broken. Scholars translate, compare, restore. Each new fragment adds detail. A new phrase of Enkidu's lament, a new line of Gilgamesh's grief. The epic remains unfinished, yet whole enough to resonate. Its influence cannot be overstated. In the flood story, we see the roots of Noah. In Gilgamesh's wandering, we glimpse echoes of Odysseus. In his grief, we hear anticipations of Achilles. The Bible, Homer, and countless later works bear its imprint. Yet the Epic of Gilgamesh is unique. It does not promise salvation. It does not offer paradise. It confronts us with the raw fact of mortality and asks us to live in spite of it. The questions it raises are timeless. What is friendship worth when death must end it? How should a king rule when power corrupts and tyrants fall? What gives life meaning, if not eternity? The epic's answer is subtle, but profound. Live fully. Love deeply. Build well. For though we die, what we create, what we share, and what we tell may endure. Today, the walls of Uruk are gone. The bricks have crumbled. The temples lie in ruins, the ziggurats worn by centuries. But Gilgamesh endures. His name, his tale, his grief, and his wisdom still reach us across 4,000 years. In every man who fears death, in every mourner who weeps for a friend, in every builder who lays a stone to outlast himself, Gilgamesh lives. And so this ancient king, half god and half mortal, achieved what he sought after all. Not eternal breath, but eternal remembrance. The first epic of humankind, and still one of its greatest. The Epic of Gilgamesh. In Mesopotamia, where this story was first told, religion was the fabric of existence. Gods were everywhere, in the rivers, the storms, the harvest, the hearth. To be human was to live in relationship with these powers, to offer sacrifices, to maintain temples, to carry out rituals that kept chaos at bay. Kingship itself was a divine office. The king was not merely ruler. He was mediator between heaven and earth, responsible for the prosperity of the people and the favor of the gods. Gilgamesh, in this context, is not simply a legendary figure, but a reflection of kingship itself. His tyranny at the beginning of the epic demonstrates the danger of unchecked power. The gods intervene not to destroy him, but to balance him, shaping his growth through the friendship of Enkidu. The story becomes a parable about what a king should be: strong but just, mighty but humble, a protector rather than an oppressor. The wall of Uruk, which closes the epic, is not merely brick. It is a symbol of the king's true purpose: to build, to leave behind works that endure for the people. Daily life in Sumer and Babylon was bound to these ideas. People lived in mud brick homes along narrow streets, with courtyards at their center. Families offered food to household gods, baked bread in clay ovens, brewed beer in clay jars. Festivals marked the seasons. Inanna's temple at Uruk hosted sacred rites, and during the New Year festival in Babylon, the king would ritually humble himself before the gods, acknowledging his dependence upon them. The epic reflects this world, where divine order structured human existence, and mortality was not only a personal fear, but a cosmic reality. The Mesopotamian view of death was stark. Unlike the Egyptians, who dreamed of paradise, or the Greeks, who imagined heroic afterlives, the Mesopotamians believed that all souls went to the same shadowy underworld. There, the dead lived in darkness, ate dust, and wore feathers like birds. Kings and peasants alike shared this fate. This vision permeates the epic. Enkidu's dream of the underworld is not just a warning, it is a cultural truth. For the Sumerians and Babylonians, immortality was impossible. The best a man could do was leave a legacy, build walls, raise children, and earn a name that would be remembered. And yet, the flood story within the epic hints at humanity's longing for something more. Across cultures, floods are a common motif. In Egypt, the Nile's flooding was a blessing. In India, stories tell of Manu surviving a deluge with the help of a fish. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood sent by Zeus. The Mesopotamian flood, however, is unique in its raw detail, its divine regret, its arc with precise measurements. Its parallels with the biblical story of Noah are undeniable. The ark, the raven and dove, the sacrifice after the flood. When George Smith read these lines in 1872, the world was stunned. Here was proof that the Bible's story was not unique, but part of a deeper, older current of myth. The rediscovery of Gilgamesh in the modern age reshaped our understanding of history. It showed that literature did not begin with Homer or the Bible, but with Mesopotamia. It revealed that the human search for meaning is far older than many had believed, and it proved that the questions of mortality, friendship, and purpose have haunted us from the beginning. The epic's influence extends beyond archaeology. In the 20th century, scholars like T.S. Eliot drew upon Gilgamesh in modern poetry. Carl Jung saw in its archetypes the hero, the companion, the journey, the descent, the very building blocks of the collective unconscious. Joseph Campbell, in his theory of the hero's journey, recognized Gilgamesh as one of the earliest examples of the pattern: the call to adventure, the trials, the loss, the quest for wisdom, and the return home with new understanding. Even today, Gilgamesh speaks to us. In an age of technology, medicine, and artificial intelligence, we still grapple with mortality. We search for ways to extend life, to cheat death, to preserve ourselves beyond the grave. But Gilgamesh reminds us that immortality does not lie in endless years. It lies in what we leave behind, in the walls we build, the art we create, the friendships we form, the stories we tell. Archaeology continues to unearth fragments of the epic. Tablets lie scattered across museums in London, Paris, Baghdad, Berlin. Each fragment is studied, translated, and fitted into the puzzle. Sometimes a new piece adds a few words to Enkidu's lament, or clarifies Gilgamesh's dreams. Slowly, patiently, scholars rebuild what time tried to erase. The epic itself becomes a metaphor for humanity's fight against oblivion. Clay crumbles, but words endure. In Uruk today, the ruins of walls and temples lie silent. The desert wind blows over broken bricks. The reeds whisper by the Euphrates. Yet in classrooms, libraries, and theaters, Gilgamesh still walks. He still wrestles with Enkidu. He still mourns his friend. He still seeks Utnapishtim. He still fails the test of sleep. He still weeps as the serpent steals the plant. And he still climbs the walls of Uruk, showing us that what we build can outlast us. The epic closes with those walls, but it also opens a window into the oldest questions of the human heart. What is the measure of a man? What do we do with the time we are given? How do we face death, not with denial, but with dignity? 4,000 years ago, a poet pressed these questions into clay. Today, we still ask them. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not only the first great story, it is a story that never ends. Each generation reads it anew, finds its own reflection in the grief of Gilgamesh, the loyalty of Enkidu, the silence of the underworld, the hope of the walls. It is a reminder that while our lives are brief, our words, our works, and our love can echo across ages. And so Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, lives, not because he found eternal life, but because his story has become eternal. From the cradle of civilization to the digital age, his voice endures. The first epic of humanity, and still one of its greatest.